They sold her antique jewelry box while she was sedated. Lorraine Delaney, widowed mother and co-owner of the past, said nothing. Kimberly smiled, called it clutter, and poured another glass. By morning, Lorraine's signature was back where it belonged, on the real deed. She'd shared her home, her memories, her name, but this time she was the only one who kept a key. Before we begin, may I ask, where in this big, beautiful world are you listening from? It's always a quiet honor to know who's sharing this space. Drop it in the comments and don't forget to subscribe. The hum of the fluorescent ceiling light was the first thing Maggie heard when she opened her eyes. It wasn't pain that greeted her, it was absence, the kind that settled into your bones. Her right hand twitched instinctively toward her chest, then her lap. No rings, hospital gown, IV, machines. She knew exactly where she was and just as clearly what had been left behind. Footsteps clicked against the linoleum just outside the door. Then came the voice, high-pitched, rehearsed, brittle. "Maggie, oh my goodness, there you are." Carla swept in like a gust of perfume and tension, her arms wide but her eyes darting too quickly over the monitors. "You gave us quite the scare," she chirped, setting a grocery store bouquet beside the monitor. "But you're looking so much better." Maggie blinked slowly. "How long have I been here?" 3 days, sweetie." Carla reached down to fluff Maggie's pillow without being asked. "Just a mild stroke," they said. "You'll be back to your old self in no time." Maggie tried to sit up. Her muscles resisted like old cables. "Where's Darren?" Carla paused just a second too long. "Oh, you know him, busy with work, but don't worry, we've taken care of everything while you were resting." Maggie's fingers twitched again. "The house." Carla smiled brightly. "Decluttered, mostly. Cleaned up some of the chaos. Honestly, it was long overdue." Something cold spread behind Maggie's ribs. "My jewelry box. The antique one. On the vanity." "Oh, that old thing," Carla said, the words flitting out like a reflex. "Probably got packed up with the other donations. There was so much random stuff everywhere. We didn't even finish going through all of it." Maggie stared at her. The box hadn't been touched in decades. Gideon had polished the hinges himself, once with a cloth and a magnifier like it was a holy relic. Carla reached for her purse, fishing for lip balm. "Anyway, Darren and I had some movers swing by. Cleared out the guest room. Mostly. Oh, and we finally got rid of that cracked armoire. Honestly, it was falling apart." Maggie turned her head slowly toward the window. Carla's tone dipped, just for a second. "You're not mad, are you?" Before Maggie could answer, a soft knock came at the door. A nurse stepped halfway in with a clipboard. "Miss Langston, just checking vitals. Your son and daughter-in-law were here with movers earlier this week, right?" Carla stiffened. The nurse smiled, oblivious. "We have a record of them signing out your house keys temporarily, just updating our log." "Thank you," Maggie said quietly. When the door closed again, she turned back to Carla. "Did Lucy come with you?" Carla blinked. "She's around, finishing some job interviews, I think. I told her not to worry." Maggie reached for the hospital phone on the side table with deliberate slowness. Her fingers shook as she dialed. Carla watched, tight-lipped. The line clicked. "Lucy?" Maggie's voice was rough, but steady. "Can you go by the house? Check the vanity in my bedroom. Bottom drawer. Look for the box." Carla folded her arms. "Really, Maggie, if it was important, you should have told us." Maggie raised a hand. Carla stopped mid-sentence. On the other end, Lucy's voice was soft. "I went by already. The vanity's empty. But I found something in the trash out back. Broken drawer. Looked like it was forced open. Silence pulsed like static. I took a picture. I'll send it to you now," Lucy added. Carla's phone buzzed in her purse. She didn't check it. Maggie didn't either. She didn't have to. Her lips curled faintly, half pain, half memory. "Then we start with the bank," she murmured. Maggie sat upright in the hospital bed, eyes fixed on the framed photograph across the room. It was the kind hospitals always chose, an old oak tree in bloom. Serene. False. Her fingers drummed lightly on the folded blanket across her knees. 1, 2, pause. 1, 2. She didn't speak as the nurse checked her vitals, didn't flinch when the cuff tightened around her arm. Her mind was already across town, back inside the house Gideon had loved too much to let go of, the house she'd kept like a museum, until someone treated it like a garage sale. Her hospital room door cracked open. Lucy stepped in, her presence hesitant but warm, like sunlight through an overcast morning. "I went back," she said quietly, holding out her phone. This was taped under the vanity. Maggie's heart kicked once, then slowed again. Lucy handed her the photo. A torn scrap of duct tape still curled at the edges, stuck to the underside of what was now just splintered wood. But beneath that, almost missed in the shadows, was something small, glossy. An edge of ivory envelope. "I pulled it," Lucy whispered. "Didn't open it. Just like you said." From her canvas tote, she produced the envelope, sealed and yellowed with age. Maggie reached out slowly, brushing her thumb over the wax seal. The handwriting was unmistakably Gideon's, sharp and deliberate, a man who believed every letter mattered. Maggie smiled, but only barely. "They never even flipped it over." Lucy nodded. "Craigslist guy came for it. I think." Someone mentioned a moving van, but they didn't check underneath. They were too fast. "Greedy people always are," Maggie murmured. She held the envelope with both hands, pressing it to her lap. Her thumb tapped against the corner. Another rhythm. 1, 2, pause. Lucy leaned against the windowsill. "You think they knew how old it was?" "The box?" "No," Maggie said softly. "But they knew it looked valuable. That's all they needed." The room fell silent, except for the steady beep of the heart monitor. Then a knock. Firm. Purposeful. A tall, silver-haired woman in a charcoal suit stepped into the room. Her heels clicked across the linoleum with the precision of a gavel. "Naomi Winters," she said, extending a hand to Lucy before turning to Maggie with a knowing nod. "I came as soon as I got your message." Lucy straightened. Maggie's posture shifted subtly, dignity filling her spine like steel. Naomi glanced at the envelope in Maggie's lap. "Is that what I think it is?" Maggie handed it to her without a word. Naomi inspected the seal, her lips pressing into a thin, satisfied line. "Still closed. Perfect. If this contains what I suspect, we're about to make things very difficult for your looters." "They're not looters," Maggie said, tone ice-edged. "They're family." Naomi arched an eyebrow. "Same difference in cases like this." She set her briefcase on the rolling table and snapped it open. The sound sliced the air like a blade. "We'll need to initiate a formal hold on any assets connected to your estate. You'll need to sign a few documents to authorize me fully." Maggie didn't hesitate. "Do it." Naomi slid a clipboard forward, already tabbed. Maggie signed with the calm of someone lighting a fuse. Lucy hovered beside her, glancing at the sealed envelope again. "What's in it?" "A key," Maggie said. "And instructions." "To what?" Maggie's eyes didn't waver. "A safe deposit box. Gideon opened under my name. He never told anyone. Said it wasn't for then, it was for later. And this," Naomi added, lifting the envelope, "makes it legally unambiguous. Anything they've touched since Maggie's hospitalization might be reversible, depending on what's inside." Lucy stared between them. "You think they'll try to cover it up?" "They don't even know they've already lost," Maggie said. She turned her gaze back to the photo of the tree. For the first time, it didn't seem so serene. Naomi tucked the envelope into a thick folder and snapped her briefcase shut again. "We go to the bank in the morning. Wear something decent, Margaret. You're going to reclaim your name." Maggie didn't smile this time. "I never gave it away." The First Harbor Trust building loomed like an old sentry over Charleston's Battery District. Red brick, thick glass, and silence that settled over its marble lobby like a hush in a church. Maggie walked slowly beside Naomi, the elevator's brass doors reflecting their shapes. One calm and upright, the other weathered but upright all the same. Lucy followed just behind, glancing around as if afraid to breathe too loudly. The elevator doors shut with a low groan. Naomi pressed the button marked B1 vault level and crossed her arms. "Remember," she said without turning, Anything we retrieve today remains in my custody until I've reviewed it fully. If what we expect is inside, it changes everything. Maggie nodded once. Let it. Lucy's voice came soft from the corner. You think he really left all that? Just sitting there all these years? Maggie didn't answer. She didn't need to. The elevator doors parted with a sigh and the vault corridor greeted them. Long, cold, impersonal. A security guard nodded as Naomi flashed her credentials. Box 3117, she said with authority. He led them through a reinforced door and into a small private room lined with heavy drawers. The number plates shimmered in the dim overhead light. When the guard slid open drawer 3117 and placed the box on the central table, Maggie's breath caught, not in fear but in recognition. The safe deposit box was nothing special, dull steel, slight scratches, but Gideon's handwriting was on the tag taped along its side. Just one word, Langston. The key slid in smoothly. Naomi turned it with a practiced flick. The lid gave with a soft metallic pop. Then silence. Maggie leaned forward. Inside was no clutter, no wasted space. Every item had its place, as if Gideon had packed it with the same precision he'd used when restoring their home brick by brick. There was a sealed manila envelope, marked Last Will and Testament, corners crisp despite the years. Beneath that, 2 vintage bearer bonds wrapped in plastic, stamped certificates of authenticity, a set of rolled blueprints tied with crimson ribbon, and in a velvet folder, handwritten ledgers and collector receipts. Maggie reached for one. Gideon's looping penmanship labeled a first edition Melville. She hadn't seen it since '98. Naomi whistled low. Maggie? They had no idea. These aren't just assets. These are legal timestamps, provenance logs. Maggie's fingers brushed over the pages slowly, reverently. That's the thing about boxes, she said. What matters is in. She paused on a faded photo, her younger self in the old parlor, Gideon standing behind her, arms folded proudly. The fireplace had just been restored, the same fireplace Carla called a soot trap. Lucy came closer. If you have this, does that mean they're in trouble? Her voice cracked slightly on the last word. Maggie didn't look up. Only if they think they're getting away with it. Naomi was already flipping through the deed copies. These override any transfer Darren signed. Even if Carla played executor, she had no authority. Lucy touched one of the sealed receipts. They sold things they didn't even understand. Worse, Naomi said. They sold things they never even owned. Maggie exhaled slowly, her hand closing the lid halfway. They thought they were cleaning out clutter. They were clearing out a battlefield. Naomi gathered the files methodically into her briefcase. This is more than enough to halt the estate sale and reverse several transactions. Good, Maggie said, voice steady. Lucy hovered by the vault door, still staring at the photo Maggie had tucked back inside the box. Will you press charges? She asked, not as a lawyer's assistant or a granddaughter, just a young woman watching a story break apart from the inside. Maggie stepped into the hallway. I won't need to, she said. They've already lit the match. Lucy sat cross-legged on the sunroom floor, her laptop balanced on a stack of hardcovers too precious to touch the tile. Afternoon light poured through the lidded windows of Maggie's home, cutting sharp angles across the room and the chaos within it. Stacks of unshelved books, empty spots on the walls where frames had once hung, dust trails where things had been moved, too recently, too hastily. Her fingers hovered over the trackpad, then clicked. The email was buried beneath a chain of forwarded messages in Carla's Gmail. Lucy had hacked it with a guest password, Carla's maiden name followed by her wedding year. No symbols, no surprises. The subject line chilled her. Subject: full inventory valuation for upcoming estate sale, Langston residence. Lucy clicked it open. The body was worse. Hi Ken. Attached is the rough list from Maggie's house. Focus on books, art and silverware. I believe most items fall under the family estate umbrella. We're aiming to liquidate before Q3. She gave verbal consent last year. Shouldn't be an issue. Let me know your total appraisal value and if you'd consider early buyers. Carla, verbal consent. Lucy leaned back, her stomach tightening. Carla had timed it. Knew Maggie wouldn't be able to dispute a damn thing from a hospital bed. A ping sounded. New message dated just 2 days ago. Darren Langston appraiser Ken Rutherford. Confirming pickup of box sets and antique books. Mom was always sentimental about them, but she gave us the go-ahead. We'll bring more this weekend. Lucy's jaw tensed. She scrolled down to the attachment. Langston Estate Appraisal List, leather-bound. Faulkner Proofs, marked copy. Langston Historical Volumes, full set. Possible donor value. Her grandfather's collection catalogued like items at a yard sale. She didn't realize Maggie had entered the room until she saw the reflection in the laptop screen. Small, deliberate, composed. "Find something?" Maggie asked. Lucy turned the screen toward her without speaking. Maggie leaned forward slowly, reading each line with quiet focus. "That's Gideon's library," she said after a long pause. "He used to polish the dust jackets. Said even books deserved dignity." Lucy's voice was tight. "They're trying to sell it all before you even leave the hospital." "I know." Maggie reached for the wireless mouse and scrolled to the bottom of the page. "They don't understand what any of it meant." Darren said, "You gave verbal consent." Maggie gave a small, bitter laugh. Verbal consent, how convenient. Her hand was already reaching for the landline. She pressed a single speed dial. "Naomi? I need you to issue a cease and desist. Carla's initiated a full estate sale under false pretense. There's a list. Lucy has it." She listened for a beat. Then yes, everything. Halt all dispersal of items, especially anything listed under rare books, silver, or personal property. She hung up without ceremony. Then she exhaled. Lucy bit her lip. What if they've already moved most of it? Maggie's eyes narrowed. Then they'll answer for every item. She reached into the desk drawer and pulled out a narrow folder. The logo embossed on the front read, "Clemens Historical Society." Maggie flipped it open, revealing a loan receipt and signed agreement. These were Gideon's donations on loan, not gifted. Some of the appraised items should still be with them. She picked up the phone again and dialed. "Hello, Janine. This is Margaret Langston. I need you to check the Langston ledger, specifically the loaned pieces from 2003 to 2008. I believe someone has claimed them as theirs." "No, I don't need speculation. I need verification." Pause. Then a faint, grim smile. "Yes. I'll hold." Lucy sat very still. Maggie didn't pace, didn't twitch. She was stone, waiting. Janine came back on. Maggie's lips pressed tighter as she listened. "Good," she said finally. "Then you'll be hearing from my attorney by end of day." She hung up. "They tried to list items still under institutional protection," Maggie said. "That's not estate sale behavior. That's fraud." Lucy's hands trembled slightly as she closed the laptop. "What happens now?" Maggie stood slowly, her hand resting on the edge of the table as if grounding herself in the wood. "Now we take inventory. Not of what they stole, but of what they thought had no eyes watching." The envelope felt heavier than it should have. Naomi slid it across Maggie's desk like it contained a verdict. The wax seal was dry and crumbling at the corners, the paper yellowed but still firm. On the front, in Gideon's unmistakable script, were 3 words, "Only when needed." Maggie didn't touch it right away. Lucy stood near the fireplace, hugging her arms, staring at the floorboards. The house was too quiet, even the wind outside had stilled. Naomi's voice broke the silence. It was tucked between the trust documents in the safe box. Postmarked Charleston. No return address, but notarized. March 2005. Maggie finally reached for the envelope. She turned it over, slid her nail under the wax, and peeled it open with care that felt holy. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper, folded twice, the kind Gideon always kept in the secretary desk. His handwriting filled every line, neat, sharp, deliberate. Maggie read silently. "Maggie, if they ever put you in a position to prove what was already yours, this is that proof. This house is not an inheritance, it is your living right. You preserved it. You endured its stories. You raised our son here, even when he stopped understanding it. You chose history over convenience. I've made sure no one can take that from you. Attached is the trust. You have full authority, including all decisions regarding property, assets, and estate items, until your passing. No one, not Darren, not any attorney, not even the courts, can override it without written consent from you. If they try, let them try. But let Naomi stop them. She knows exactly what to do. Maggie didn't speak for a long time. When she finally looked up, her eyes were dry, but her hands were trembling. She passed the letter to Naomi, then pulled a second document from the envelope. Naomi unfolded it quickly. Her eyes scanned the notarized trust form, the signatures, the seal. Then she read it again, slower this time. Her breath caught at the last line. She looked at Maggie with a mix of awe and fire. This, Naomi said, holding up the page like a court exhibit, nullifies everything: the estate sales, the appraisals, Darren's false statements, any power of attorney they tried to manufacture. She dropped it flat on the desk. They had no authority, not one shred. Lucy stepped forward slowly. He really did all that? Naomi nodded. He buried a legal firewall right where only Maggie could access it. And no one, not even me, knew it existed. Lucy reached for the letter, her fingers brushing over Gideon's ink. She read just the first paragraph before her voice cracked. I always thought he didn't trust me, or that he just trusted Dad more. But he... Her voice broke. Maggie rose from her chair. She walked over and wrapped her arms around Lucy gently, resting her chin on her granddaughter's shoulder. Your grandfather didn't play favorites, she whispered. He played the long game. Lucy cried silently. No sobs, just the kind of quiet, stunned tears that came when the ground beneath you shifted unexpectedly, and suddenly felt solid again. Maggie held her tighter. They never read the fine print, she said. But Gideon always wrote in it. Naomi gathered the letter and trust, placing both into her leather portfolio like they were crown jewels. This changes the legal battlefield completely, she said. They thought they were stealing from an old woman in recovery. What they were really doing was trespassing on a locked estate with teeth. Maggie turned back to her desk, where the appraisal list still sat open on the screen. And now? Naomi smiled thinly. Now I start the reversal. Their sales go into hold status, retroactively. We're going to make it very hard for any buyer to claim clean hands. Lucy wiped her eyes. What if they panic? Maggie's voice was calm. Let them. It smelled of cinnamon, ink, and old wood. Darren chose it because it didn't feel like a place anyone would be watching, but someone was. Across from him sat a man in his late 60s, dressed like the kind of person who knew the difference between a vintage cabinet and a reproduction. Elbow patches, gold-rimmed glasses. He sipped an Americano with practiced boredom. Darren placed a small velvet pouch on the table and leaned in. Early 1900s, I think, he said. My dad kept it in the top drawer of his desk for years. Claimed it came from his grandfather. The man opened the pouch slowly. 3 coins nestled inside. Old, scarred with time. Still gleaming. Do you have authentication? The man asked, inspecting one with a jeweler's loupe. No, but it's real. He was a collector. A historian. You can Google his name, Gideon Langston. The man didn't look up. You said 500 for all 3? Darren nodded. Cash only. The man reached into his coat and slid a thin envelope across the table. Inside, bills, crisp and stacked. On top, a business card with only a first name, Thomas, and a phone number. You come across anything else from that collection? The man said without smiling. Call me first. Darren scooped the money into his pocket and stood. You got it. He walked out, never noticing the young woman seated at the corner table with earbuds in, one of which wasn't plugged in at all. She tapped her phone once, screen still recording. Naomi Winters closed her laptop on the other side of Charleston and smiled. She'd seen the video within minutes, timestamped, GPS tagged. Darren's voice crisp, the exchange clear. I've got receipts now, she murmured. At Maggie's dining table, every document was laid out like a crime scene. Receipts from Craigslist, coin appraisals, a copy of the estate inventory list marked with red slashes where items had already been sold. Lucy sat beside Naomi, cross-referencing a stack of yellowed index cards Maggie had preserved since 1986, Gideon's original cataloging system. Every drawer was logged, Lucy said, her finger tracing the notes. He even listed where things weren't stored, so nobody would look in the wrong place. Maggie stood at the window, arms crossed, watching the breeze stir the backyard magnolia. They sold the cufflinks, she said quietly. The ones I gave Gideon our first Christmas. Lucy checked the receipts. Yeah, sold in a group of miscellaneous gold and silver to a buyer in Mount Pleasant. Maggie's jaw tightened. Add it. Naomi scribbled a new entry in the ledger. That brings us to 19 items. 21, Lucy corrected. I just confirmed the missing inkwell and the Regency silver comb. Outside, a black sedan drove slowly past the house. Maggie watched it without blinking. They're watching, she murmured. Naomi glanced up. So are we. Back in the cafe, the collector Thomas walked toward his car and reached into his coat pocket. He pulled out a Bluetooth earpiece and tapped it. Item transfer confirmed. Coin set scene 0004. Gideon Langston, Provenance. Darren provided verbal claim of ownership. Funds exchanged. Audio and visual recorded. A voice crackled in his ear. Copy that. Forward everything to Winters. Thomas grinned. Already done. Carla's heels clicked across her kitchen floor as she sorted through her mail. Pre-approvals, donation requests, a business card she didn't remember pocketing. Her eyes narrowed at the name, Thomas W. Antiquities. She looked toward the bedroom, where Darren had been pacing all morning. They're too quiet, she muttered. Darren didn't answer. Back at Maggie's, the sun had dipped low. The war table was nearly full. Lucy closed her laptop. They're going to feel it soon. Maggie didn't look away from the window. No, she said. They're already feeling it. Carla slammed the dishwasher door with more force than necessary, the echo sharp against the tile and glass of her sleek, modern kitchen. Darren stood by the island, arms folded, still scrolling through an email Naomi had sent just an hour earlier. I told you, Carla snapped, voice cracking. I don't have that damn ring. Darren didn't answer. She threw the dish towel onto the counter and turned to him. Why would I keep something so ugly? Anyway, it's ancient. She never even wore it. He looked up finally. Because it was worth something. Because it was hers. And because now it's part of a legal file. Carla rolled her eyes. They don't know where it is. But she was wrong. Lucy stood in the upstairs guest room of Carla's house, phone camera on, the door quietly latched behind her. Carla had gone out to run errands. Lucy had told her she needed to drop off some paperwork from the lawyer. Carla left her unattended. Arrogant or careless, it didn't matter now. The vanity looked staged. A mirror too clean, a jewelry box too curated. Still, the smell of Maggie's perfume lingered faintly on the wood. The same rose water and lavender blend she'd worn since Lucy was a child. Lucy opened the lid. At first glance it looked like a spread of cheap gold-plated earrings and costume beads. But nestled at the back, tucked under a folded scarf was the ring, the one Maggie hadn't worn since Gideon passed. A solitaire emerald flanked by two delicate gold leaves, tiny hand-etched initials inside the band, G to M 1959. Lucy stared at it. Throat tight, she snapped a photo, lifted the ring gently with a tissue, and placed it into a padded envelope. Then she walked out, without a word. Naomi placed the ring on Maggie's desk like it was evidence in a federal case. Unbroken setting, same engraving, she said. We have confirmation. It was hidden on Carla's vanity. Lucy found it this morning. Maggie touched it gently with her fingertip, then pulled her hand back. She never asked, Maggie said softly. She just took. She lied, Naomi corrected, repeatedly. She opened a manila folder and flipped it around. Darren's lawyer submitted a statement. He claims you gave the ring to Carla while in recovery. He says you were mentally compromised and wanted her to have something sentimental. Maggie raised her eyebrow. I was diagnosed stable and lucid on admittance. Exactly, Naomi said. So I pulled your chart. Here. She slid another page across. Hospital intake. Time stamped. Cognitive response normal. No memory loss. No confusion. Maggie had even corrected a nurse about her birth date. This is textbook weaponization of an elder's supposed fragility, Naomi said, voice hardening. They're leaning into a vulnerability defense they fabricated. Lucy stood quietly in the corner, arms crossed. They're not just stealing things, they're rewriting the story while she's still alive. Naomi nodded. That's where we stop them. She slid a formal document forward, lined, stamped, signed. I'm filing for an amendment to the complaint. It adds exploitation of a vulnerable adult under South Carolina law. It's a felony, one that includes coercion, misrepresentation, and fraudulent gain. Maggie looked up, sharp. Will they go to jail? Naomi didn't blink. If a judge sees this ring as proof of intent, it's possible. Lucy stepped forward and placed a folded scarf next to the ring, the same scarf that had been wrapped around it on Carla's vanity. I wanted to give it back to you, Lucy said quietly. But I also wanted you to know she hid it. Deep. Maggie reached for the scarf, pressing it to her chest for a moment. Then she opened her desk drawer and placed both ring and scarf inside, closing it with finality. She thought hiding it was clever, Maggie said. She never understood what it meant to hold something sacred. Naomi packed the documents into her briefcase. Now we make them answer for every inch they've crossed. Naomi's voice was steady, almost clinical, as she spoke into the phone on speaker. Yes. Effective immediately. Freeze all disbursements and withdrawals tied to the Langston Family Trust. Margaret Langston is the sole trustee, and we've submitted full documentation. A pause. Then, yes, including accounts Darren Langston is linked to. Carla as well. All of them. She ended the call and closed the folder on the table with a soft snap, like the lid of a coffin. Maggie didn't flinch. She stood by the window of her study, watching the camellias sway in the breeze. That's the first breath they'll feel missing, Naomi said. Liquid access. Lucy looked up from the floor where she sat cross-legged, changing the access code on Maggie's smart home hub. Gates updated, so is the front door and garage panel. They won't get in without a locksmith or a crowbar. They'll try both, Maggie replied. Eventually, Lucy reached for a box of new brass keys. I'll make copies. Just us three? Maggie nodded. No one else. Outside, the locksmith's van hummed in the drive. 2 deadbolts had already been replaced. The last would be the back entrance, where Carla used to sneak out bags marked donate when Maggie was asleep. By evening they'd be shut out for good. Her voice wavered once Maggie gave her name. Yes, Mrs. Langston. We've been contacted by your attorney. Everything tagged from the Langston collection is now officially under review and marked with a legal hold status. We're reaching out to buyers this week to explain the change. Maggie didn't smile. Make sure they understand that if they try to resell, they'll be named in a fraud case. Yes, ma'am. We've flagged everything, I promise. Maggie hung up and slid the list of sold items into Naomi's pile. Now no one can pretend they didn't know. The doctor's office was quiet, clinical, and smelled faintly of antiseptic and citrus oil. Maggie sat in the corner of the waiting room, leafing through a dog-eared copy of Southern Living, when the sliding glass door opened. Darren walked in. He was alone, hair damp from sweat, jaw clenched like someone trying not to yell. Maggie, he said under his breath, stepping close. We need to talk. She didn't look up. You were told not to contact me. He lowered his voice but stepped closer. Everything you're doing, it's going too far. You've frozen our accounts. You're treating us like criminals. You sold from my house, Maggie said calmly. You liquidated heirlooms. You lied about my mental state. You weren't well, Darren snapped. She turned a page in the magazine. My intake chart says otherwise. He leaned down too close now. You want revenge? Fine. But don't drag this through court. Don't humiliate us. A nurse appeared, glancing between them. Is everything all right here? Maggie looked up, her expression smooth and even. No, this man is harassing me. He has no legal right to speak on my behalf. The nurse's face changed instantly. Sir, I'm going to need you to leave the premises. Darren's jaw moved like he wanted to argue, but he didn't. He backed up slowly, tossing a final glare at Maggie before turning to leave. The door hissed shut behind him. Maggie folded the magazine in her lap. She didn't look shaken, she looked finished. Back home, Naomi met her at the door with a fresh folder and a tired smile. Everything's frozen, emails sent, properties secured. You now have full control, Maggie. Documented and enforced. Maggie slipped her coat from her shoulders and hung it on the brass hook Gideon installed in 1978. Good, she said. Then let's keep going. Naomi raised an eyebrow. What's next? Maggie turned toward the study, her silhouette framed in the doorway like a monument. They sold the box, she said. Now I'm unpacking the rest. Lucy's fingers flew across the keyboard in a blur of tabs, timestamps and upload logs. Her laptop sat open on Maggie's dining room table, surrounded by labeled USBs, a tangle of cords, and a growing collection of damning evidence. She didn't look up when she said, "They recorded themselves. Half the damage was self-inflicted." Naomi raised an eyebrow from across the table. "You found a voice memo, Carla," Lucy said, laughing on a call with the appraiser. She said, and I quote, "Maggie doesn't even know what year it is, let alone what we're selling. Honestly, we're doing her a favor." Naomi looked at Maggie. Maggie sat quietly, chin resting on her knuckles. The insult didn't land like a slap. It landed like confirmation, the kind that leaves nothing else to doubt. Lucy plugged in another drive. "I've got the estate sale emails, Darren's inventory lists, the Craigslist post archives, screen recordings of Carla's deleted Facebook messages, even a video of Darren handing off one of Gideon's rare books to a guy who posted it for resale that same day." Naomi leaned back. "This is no longer a civil estate dispute." Maggie finally spoke. "It's character assassination, from people who thought no one would care if an old woman lost her mind." She stood slowly, crossed the room, and pulled open a drawer in Gideon's secretary desk. From within it she removed a card cream, thick stock, edges slightly worn. "Still have his number?" she asked, handing it to Naomi. "Henry Dalton. He used to run the investigative desk at the Charleston Weekly, owed Gideon a few favors." Naomi looked down at the card, then back at Maggie. "You're sure?" "I'm done hiding this behind law degrees," Maggie said. "Let's make it public." The article dropped 4 days later. Elder theft hidden in plain sight, how one Charleston family tried to erase a living legacy. It was brutal. Photos of the rare books, screenshots of Carla's appraisals, audio of her voice mocking Maggie's memory, paired with hospital records that showed full cognitive clarity. A clipped video of Darren handing over a coin pouch, dated and tagged. A side-by-side of the museum registry listing Gideon Langston as donor and a Craigslist post trying to resell those same artifacts. By noon, Maggie's phone had begun to ring. By 2 hours, it didn't stop. Old friends, former colleagues, curators, even strangers. Some called to apologize, some to say they never believed Carla anyway, others to offer help, lawyers, archivists, even a judge who remembered Gideon from a symposium in the 80s. And then came the message from the museum. Lucy opened the email first. "They've withdrawn Carla's gala invitation," she said, blinking at the screen. "Said her conduct violates the institution's values and expectations of stewardship." Maggie let out a slow breath. "It was never about the party," she said. "It's about who they tried to become in the vacuum of who they erased." Darren sat silent across from her, the article open on his iPad, jaw clenched. "They didn't write anything that isn't true," he muttered. "She turned the whole city against us." "No," came a voice behind them. Lucy's. She stood in the doorway, unreadable. "You did that part yourself." Carla stared at her, red-faced and trembling. "You're siding with her now?" Lucy didn't blink. "I'm siding with what's true." Carla stepped forward, finger raised. "You think anyone will remember you when this blows over?" "I hope not," Lucy said, "because they'll still be remembering Maggie." But Maggie didn't care about numbers. She cared that no one could pretend anymore. Naomi entered without knocking. She carried a folder. "They've retained a crisis PR firm," she said flatly. "Carla's trying to rebrand herself as a misunderstood caregiver." Maggie didn't even look up. Let her try. She forgot the one thing about history. What's that? Maggie smiled, faint and sharp. You can't rewrite it once the receipts are published. Carla sat at a two-top outside Finch and Feather Cafe, the exact place she'd once bragged to friends about being too exclusive for the riffraff. Now she clutched a to-go cup like it was an anchor, oversized sunglasses, hiding bloodshot eyes, lips trembling just enough for the camera. A friend familiar enough to fake concern, distant enough to record it, held her phone discreetly angled from across the street. Carla dabbed her cheek with a monogrammed napkin and sniffed loud enough to sell the performance. I never meant to hurt her, she said shakily, voice just above a whisper. Maggie was like a mother to me. The barista watching from inside whispered to a coworker. She's rehearsed that line 3 times. The friend hit upload. By the time Carla stood and walked slowly toward her car, the caption had already been written. She only cried once the cameras showed up. Maggie sat on the porch of her home, shaded by the columned facade Gideon once repaired by hand, sipping her tea with the same stillness she wore like armor. She didn't respond to the video. She didn't have to. By sunset it had gone viral again. Comments skewered Carla's forced tears, her outfit coordination, the suspicious way her car keys were placed just so beside the untouched muffin. Someone on Twitter called it emotional theft, the remix. Darren tried next. His Facebook post arrived at 6:42 p.m., written like a press release and signed like a eulogy. In times like these, families must remember love above litigation. We've made mistakes but not crimes. We ask Maggie to meet us in compassion. Let's restore what truly matters, healing, not headlines. It got 13 likes, mostly from neighbors who hadn't read the article. Naomi read it out loud in Maggie's study, her mouth curled in a half grin. Healing, she said dryly, isn't a legal defense. Maggie didn't look up from her folder. Neither is sentimentality. Naomi closed the manila envelope she'd just finished preparing. Final warning letters go out in the morning. Return the remaining items or face formal charges. Postmarked? Maggie asked. Certified, Naomi said. Tracked, escalated, and signed with just enough mercy to be unimpeachable in court. Maggie nodded. Good. She reached for her ledger, flipping to a blank page. Let's start a new column. I want to separate what was stolen from what was surrendered. That night, the hallway outside Maggie's bedroom glowed with warm lamplight. Lucy crept in quietly, not out of fear but reverence. She carried a small, lacquered box in her hands. Inside it, the wedding ring Maggie hadn't worn in years, recovered weeks ago from Carla's vanity, and kept safe in the meantime like something not yet ready to return. Now it was. Lucy crossed the room and opened the top drawer of Maggie's dresser. The scent of cedar and dried lavender met her nose, calm, preserved, unchanged. She nestled the box between a stack of handkerchiefs and a small tin of mothballs, then gently closed the drawer. She didn't tell Maggie. She didn't need to. Some restorations happened quietly. Across town, Darren stared at his phone, watching the red notification bubbles multiply. A text from the museum. His board nomination had been withdrawn. An email from their accountant. Assets inaccessible until legal resolution. Carla stood behind him, silent, watching her own name trend for all the wrong reasons. She didn't cry this time. There was no one left to perform for. A silence had settled over the house that wasn't empty. It was earned. Naomi stepped beside her. They'll either return what's left, she said, or they'll drown in the process of defending why they didn't. Maggie nodded. They never understood that when you take what isn't yours, you inherit the consequences. The notary's pen clicked twice, then silence fell across the room like a dropped curtain. Maggie sat at the head of the table in her study, flanked by Naomi on one side, Lucy on the other. A single lamp illuminated the documents spread before her. Pages that would decide the shape of her legacy long after the dust of betrayal had settled. Initial here, Naomi said, voice low but resolute. Then here. This signature makes it binding. Maggie picked up the pen. Her hand didn't shake. She signed slowly, carefully, like she was inscribing something sacred. When she finished, she laid the pen down and exhaled. Naomi nodded. That's it. The old will is officially null. The new one is active. Lucy glanced over. So it's done? Maggie turned her gaze to her granddaughter. Steady, calm, and final. It's begun. The notary slid the documents into a sealable envelope and marked it with the official stamp. Naomi checked the corners, the initials, the seals. No errors, no loopholes. Carla and Darren were gone from the will, cut clean, with cause, no room for challenge. Lucy Langston was now executor, trustee and sole heir. That afternoon, Maggie returned to the deposit box branch. This time, not at First Harbor, but at the coastal office near the marina, far from downtown and its lingering whispers. She brought with her a half-sized velvet case, smaller than Gideon's original but no less curated. Inside, a selection of rare coins from Gideon's personal collection, not the most expensive, not the flashiest, but the ones he loved most, the ones he used to polish after dinner, with a loop and a cloth while humming old jazz records. A state archivist waited in the glass office, flanked by 2 museum staff and a ledger thicker than a phone book. Ms. Langston, the archivist greeted, offering his hand. We're honored. Are you sure about this? Maggie smiled faintly. You'll keep them where history belongs. That's all I ever wanted. She signed the release form with the same pen she'd used on her new will. Half the collection, she said, for education, preservation, and if I may, truth. They nodded solemnly. The coins were logged and sealed. The donation finalized. She left with an empty case and a full spine. That evening, back at the house, Maggie opened a separate lockbox tucked into the second drawer of the new secretary desk. Inside, the remaining coins, the more valuable half, each wrapped in parchment, labeled in Gideon's hand, still faintly smelling of lemon oil and thyme. She placed the lockbox in a separate satchel and walked it out herself. No driver, no announcement. The second deposit box was at a small local credit union. No one would think to look there. No public records. No shared access. She slid the box into the vault herself and watched the door close on the weight of what would never be taken from her again. Lucy sat on the couch that night, cross-legged, absently flipping through Gideon's old scrapbook while Maggie read beside her. The lamp between them cast twin shadows across the shelves, one young, one old, both made of quiet resilience. You didn't have to name me everything, Lucy said softly. Maggie didn't look up. You didn't ask for it. Lucy nodded. That's why I'll deserve it. A silence passed, gentle, earned. I kept the cufflinks, Maggie added. The ones they sold. Naomi tracked them down through the collector. Bought them back under my name. Lucy smiled. Gideon would have liked that. No, Maggie said. He would have expected it. Carla is contesting the asset freeze. Darren says the will must be forged. Maggie didn't blink. Let them come. Naomi nodded. Then I'll be ready. She held out a new document. Maggie unfolded it. It was a printed article draft from Charleston Historical Quarterly. Langston Collection returns. Widow of historian donates legacy to public trust. Below that, a line in bold. Ms. Langston declined to comment, but her estate attorney confirmed. She has nothing left to prove, only to protect the kind of room where reputations didn't just rise or fall. They echoed. Maggie entered on Naomi's arm, cane in hand, spine straight. She wore navy-tailored, sharp and quiet, not an outfit of mourning, an outfit of defense. Lucy followed 2 steps behind, carrying a thin black folio and an envelope marked Exhibit C. Across the aisle, Darren adjusted his tie for the 3rd time. Carla sat beside him, jaw clenched, dressed in a soft beige cardigan that screamed sympathy, but reeked of strategy. Their lawyer whispered something that didn't stick. The judge entered. All rose, and just like that it began. Exhibit A, original safe deposit box key, submitted with notarized chain of custody documents. Located with witness Lucy Langston, recovered from a sealed envelope belonging to the deceased, Gideon Langston. Click. The judge nodded. Naomi continued. Exhibit B, property schematics of the antique jewelry box that held the key, verified by historical appraiser Kenneth Rutherford, who reviewed the false estate inventory filed by Carla Langston. "Appraiser is here?" the judge asked. Naomi gestured. "He is, along with Mr. Owens from First Harbor Trust and Nurse Renee Keller from Roper St. Francis Hospital. They were sworn in, one by one." Owens confirmed Maggie's exclusive authorization over the box. Rutherford testified that the antique box had been misrepresented and misappraised under Carla's name. Nurse Keller, calm professional and devastating, testified that Maggie had been fully oriented, clear-minded, and cooperative upon admission. "There was no medical evidence of confusion," she stated flatly. Naomi stepped back. No further questions. Then came Carla's turn. Her attorney stood. "Mrs. Langston, Carla, can you explain the timeline of your decisions regarding the home and its contents?" Carla cleared her throat. "We were acting in good faith. My husband and I believed Maggie was no longer able to manage things. It was messy, cluttered. We tried to help. And the appraisals? I assumed we had permission." Naomi stood before the judge could even be prompted. "Your Honor, may I?" The judge nodded. Briefly, Naomi approached slowly. "You assumed?" she asked. Carla shifted. "Well, Darren said she'd mentioned. Did she sign anything?" "No." "Did you see a written will granting you executor powers?" "No." "Did you ask her if she was competent?" "I didn't need to." Naomi stepped back. "That's the problem." She turned to the judge. "Carla and Darren didn't ask because they didn't care. They assumed control, transferred property, sold heirlooms, while the legal trustee was alive, competent, and recovering from a stroke they used as a smokescreen." The judge folded his hands. "Mrs. Langston, Carla, did you sell your mother-in-law's property while she was hospitalized?" Carla hesitated. "We facilitated the sale of some items. Yes." The courtroom fell silent. The judge's voice was quieter now. "While she was alive, and competent, and not under your legal authority?" Carla blinked. Yes." He looked down at his notes. "Then this is not a matter of miscommunication. It's a matter of entitlement." He turned toward Maggie. "Mrs. Langston, do you have anything to add?" Maggie stood. "I was never confused," she said. "Not once." The judge nodded. "Case dismissed. All authority remains with Margaret Langston. Motion to seal disputed inventory and preserve chain of evidence is granted. Any further asset movement will be considered willful interference." A soft gasp escaped from Carla's side. Darren slumped in his seat like air had been knocked out of him. Maggie didn't flinch. Bate. Outside the courthouse, the late afternoon sun painted the columns gold. Lucy wrapped her arms around Maggie in a full, firm embrace. "They forgot you don't lose," she whispered. Maggie leaned into the hug. "Just for a moment." "No," she said. "They just stopped reading before the end." Naomi joined them with a quiet smile. "It's done." Maggie turned to face the press waiting down the steps. She didn't wave. She didn't speak. She just stood still and let them capture a woman who'd been erased, and then rebuilt herself in full. The marble floors of the Charleston Museum reflected the past with brutal honesty. Every step echoed, sharper than memory, heavier than silence. Maggie moved slowly through the east wing, her cane barely tapping the polished stone. Lucy walked beside her, guiding without rushing, her docent badge pinned just above her heart. Naomi followed close behind, expression unreadable but proud. The new exhibit wasn't just an addition, it was a correction. At the far end of the gallery, above the entrance in carved bronze lettering, were the words "Langston Family Preservation and Betrayal." The ampersand was deliberate. Inside the glass cases, Gideon's artifacts sat like sentinels returned from war, his cataloging ledgers, the inkwell from 1847, Civil War currency once mistaken for counterfeit, the Melville first edition with the cracked spine still intact, a handwritten note from 1982 that read simply, "Protect the story, even when they don't." Maggie stopped in front of the centerpiece, a restored replica of Gideon's study desk, complete with his leather blotter, his initials burned into the corner. Lucy cleared her throat and stepped slightly ahead. She addressed a small group of early visitors, her voice steady, respectful. This wing represents not just what was preserved, but what almost wasn't. The artifacts were nearly lost in an illegal sale, one that relied on assumptions about age, memory, and power. But history is stubborn, and so was Margaret Langston. Polite applause followed. Maggie didn't smile, but her eyes softened. Near the rear wall, a bronze plaque caught the light, a legacy protected through vigilance. In honor of those who kept the records and those who refused to be erased. Carla and Darren weren't there. Their names weren't mentioned. Their photos, once planned for the family archive, had been quietly removed from the official donor history. Maggie hadn't banned them. The museum had. A private letter from the director confirmed it due to reputational risk. Both Carla and Darren Langston are no longer welcome at future gala events, fundraisers, or affiliated exhibitions. Darren had tried to protest. Carla hadn't responded at all. That afternoon, Maggie sat in the reading alcove, where children flipped through laminated books on Southern architecture and textile trade. She watched a boy trace his fingers over a replica of Gideon's coin map, then run back to show his mother. Naomi sat down beside her, careful not to disrupt the silence. "You didn't just win," she said quietly. "You made it permanent." Maggie looked at her, then back toward the exhibit. "They tried to make me small," she said, "but I've never belonged to silence." Lucy approached, then handing Maggie a folded program from the day's event. On the back in italic script was a quote Naomi had chosen without telling either of them. "The past survives through witnesses. Today you were one." Maggie held the paper like scripture, not because it was pretty, because it was proof. And this time the proof was under glass. The air smelled of salt and garden thyme, and somewhere nearby, a wind chime made from old spoons tapped a faint lullaby against the breeze. Lucy stepped into the room with something small cradled in both hands. Maggie looked up from her chair by the window, where she'd been sorting through a binder of press clippings from the museum installation. She didn't say anything at first, just watched as Lucy crossed the floor like she was carrying something holy. It was a wooden box, no bigger than a paperback novel, carved smooth, cherry-stained, with a delicate brass latch. A near replica of the one Carla had tried to erase, the jewelry box. Maggie thought lost for good. Lucy knelt beside her and set it gently on Maggie's lap. "I had it made," she said. "Same dimensions, same grain. Took the carpenter 3 weeks." Maggie traced her fingers along the lid, but didn't open it. Lucy nudged it forward with a soft smile. "There's something inside." Maggie unlatched it slowly. Inside, resting on velvet, was a folded note on yellowed paper, an exact copy of the one that had come with the key in the safe box. Same words, same looping hand. "Only when needed." Maggie's fingers trembled, just slight. She brought the paper to her chest, pressing it there for a long moment, as tears welled in her eyes, but didn't fall. "Not yet. He always knew," she whispered. "He knew they'd come for it." Lucy sat back on her heels. "He didn't just plan for it. He trusted you to finish it." They sat like that for a moment. 2 generations in a room full of history, both holding pieces of a man who'd never lived to see the war he'd anticipated. Later that day, they walked into the garden behind the house, where the soil was warm and loose beneath the magnolia tree that had bloomed every year since Gideon planted it the spring after Lucy was born. Maggie held the small key in one hand. Lucy carried a spade and a copper tag etched with a single date, March 2005. They knelt at the base of the tree. "He kept it hidden because he knew I wouldn't want revenge," Maggie said. "Only resolution." Lucy handed her the tag. "Then this is the final line in the ledger." Together they buried the key, a symbol of all that had been hidden, guarded, protected, and covered it in layers of earth, like closing a final chapter. When they stood, Maggie pressed the copper tag into the soil like a quiet marker. No names, just the date, just the memory. Inside, she framed the envelope, the real one, still marked in Gideon's hand, and hung it in her study above the fireplace. It sat there now like a document of record, a final public whisper. She was always telling the truth. Just as Maggie stepped back to look at it, Cleo padded into the room, her old tabby cat, finally recovering after weeks of hiding during the legal storm. Cleo hopped onto the windowsill, gave the envelope a long look, and then flicked her tail like punctuation. Lucy laughed softly. Even the cat approves. Maggie nodded, still watching the frame. Cleo yawned, stretched, and then looked at them both with disinterested authority before curling back into a circle. Now that, Maggie said quietly, is how you bury a betrayal. Naomi appeared in the doorway with fresh documents under one arm, but she paused when she saw the frame. The moment, the quiet finality in the air. She didn't speak. Some victories didn't require declarations, just proof you survived, and didn't blink. The house was quieter now. Not hollow, not somber, just settled, as if it had exhaled after holding its breath too long. Maggie walked the length of the front hall barefoot, her fingers brushing the edge of the chair rail. Gideon installed when Lucy was still in pigtails. The floorboards creaked in all the familiar ways. No footsteps came behind her, no voices raised, just the steady hum of a house that had finally remembered who it belonged to. Each room she passed held something reclaimed, the inkwell polished and centered beneath its shadow box, the restored wedding photo, no longer stuffed in a bottom drawer, the reframed blueprint Gideon had annotated in red pencil. The one Darren once tried to claim had no historic relevance. She paused longest in the kitchen. There, on the refrigerator door, was a magnetic strip of Lucy's grad school acceptance letter. Full ride archival studies, University of Virginia, underneath, in Maggie's block handwriting, for preservation and protection. She had revived the education fund 2 weeks earlier, from the trust they'd once frozen to keep safe from greed. Naomi had handled the transfer with a smile and a finality that needed no words. Maggie smiled at the envelope, then turned to the window. Outside, the camellias swayed gently, still blooming in clusters. The house was hers. The legacy intact, the war over, and Carla and Darren gone. No letters, no lawsuits, no phone calls begging for second chances. The silence they'd left behind wasn't absence. It was surrender. At the Charleston Museum, a new bronze plaque gleamed beneath the final display case. Maggie Langston, historian of her own life, no date of death, no in memoriam, just a living legacy mounted in metal and testimony. Lucy stood beside the plaque during the unveiling ceremony, dressed in soft navy, her docent badge replaced by a thin silver chain around her neck. Gideon's old watch fob, now her keepsake. She hadn't worn it for show. She wore it because it reminded her of time spent wisely. Back at the Langston house, twilight slipped in like an old friend. Naomi stepped into Maggie's study, setting one last sealed folder on the desk. All done, she said gently. It's sealed for good. Maggie nodded. No loose ends? None. Probate closed. Titles transferred. Will archived with the historical registry. Maggie turned back to her leather-bound journal, one she hadn't touched since the storm began. She opened to the final page and wrote in clean, unshaking script, "Trust is built in silence and guarded in safe." She closed the book slowly and stood. No speech, no performance, just clarity. Cleo stirred from her spot by the fireplace and padded beside her like a sentry, tail curled high, eyes half-lidded. In the hallway, Maggie paused by the framed envelope, the one that had started it all. The wax seal still faintly visible, Gideon's handwriting etched into time. She reached up, brushed a speck of dust from the corner and smiled, not with victory, but with peace. They lost the key, she said softly. I held everything that mattered.